Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming to this seminar for Penti Soliste. We are so excited that you're here. If you haven't done so already, please put where you're joining us from and your teaching context in the chat. We want to get to know everyone. And before we get started, I want to give you some news from Penti Soliste. First, if you have not become a member of Penti Soliste yet, please consider going to our website at pentisoliste.org and joining today. A year membership to Penti Soliste is only $25, and you get programming like this throughout the year, as well as some in-person events. So please consider joining us. I also want to let you know about the next two events that are coming up for Penti Soliste, one which is online and one which is in person. The online event is going to be on May 11th, Monday, May 11th, from 5 to 6 p.m. And it's going to use the same link that you used to get yourself in here today. And that is going to be an Ask Me Anything with friend of Penti Soliste and immigration attorney Rachel Rudder. So this is going to be an open forum with a legal expert exploring current immigration enforcement policies and processes and what they mean for the ESL students and families we serve. If you have a question for Rachel that you would like to send us in advance, please send us an email at board@pentisoliste.org with the subject Ask Me Anything, and let us know what questions you have for Rachel. We'll send those to her in advance so that she's prepared for her forum. Of course, you can come and ask questions when you get there. I also want to let you know that on May 30th, we're going to be having our spring symposium at the Welcoming Center for New Pennsylvanians right here in Philadelphia, right near City Hall. The theme is Adapting, Reflecting, Learning, Students at the Center. And so that's going to be a half-day event, and that is free for all Penti Soliste members, and you'll even get some networking and brunch. Our plenary speaker, Dr. Roxana Senishin, is going to be talking about student-centered lesson planning, student identities, and reflective teaching practices. So it's going to be a great event. All right, so consider joining us for those. And now I would like to turn things over to Sandy Janella, who is a friend of Penn TESOL East and a board member of Three Rivers TESOL in Western Pennsylvania. And she's going to introduce our speaker for the evening.
Okay,
Sandy?
thank you, Bill. So, Megan Evangelista is an educator of Pittsburgh's English language learners, currently serving as Pittsburgh Public Schools English Language Development Instructional Specialist. Her background as a caseworker in refugee resettlement informs her practice as an educator, working closely with refugee and migrant populations from around the world. Megan has also served international students at Duquesne University's Center for Global Engagement and Adjunct Faculty in preparing teachers to work with English language learners at Duquesne University School of Education. A native of the Pittsburgh region, Megan has lived abroad in Italy and Ireland and is a stained glass window artist, former dance instructor, and, best part for last, mother of three daughters. Go ahead, Megan.
Thank you, Sandy, and thank you, Bill, so much for organizing this event and having us come together to talk about how we are supporting English learners in K-12 education. So I am thrilled that there are some students, some graduate students here, that there are people in the field here, and that more listening to this after we've recorded it are here thinking about what our students need, how we can best support our students and their families at this time, and also, as teachers, how are we taking care of ourselves, but also thinking about this current time and how we are being responsive to what our families need. So I will just jump in and get started. So we're going to talk through some kind of big picture ideas for teaching English learners who are our students. How do we support them? and how do we adapt instruction. And throughout, I'll kind of be weaving in how I support teachers in my role as an instructional specialist in ESL or ELD, English Language Development. So let's first start with some essential questions. So we are going to be looking at who are our English learners in K-12 and how are they supported by schools? And in my case, how are they supported in the city of Pittsburgh? So if you are in our city, you'll be learning about some of the agencies and nonprofits that work with our students. And then I'm sure through Penn TESOL East, we can make some connections to what's happening in Philadelphia and Reading and other locations in Pennsylvania. And then the next question, how can best practices for teaching in K-12 inform my practice? So you may be a university teacher, you may be in the adult ESL field, you might not be working with K-12 students, but I think that there are a lot of things that will overlap in what you do in your teaching. So I just wanted to share on the right, and you'll see some photos throughout my presentation. These are students that I had back at one of my teaching assignments through Pittsburgh Public Schools at Pittsburgh Concord in the South Hills. So these boys are all Nepali speakers. And now I'm so old, these boys are close to graduating from high school. So it's wild to see them, they've grown up so much and they're thinking about what they want to do in their careers once they leave high school. And it's great in my role because I get to check in with them and see, how much they've changed and grown. Okay, so our learning goals are that we as educators will explore information on the language and culture of K-12 English learners. And we will also delve into strategies to adapt content and efficiently plan for English learners at varying proficiency levels from beginners all the way through advanced students. So of course, whenever we talk about coming together as a group, we have to check in with ourselves and think about how we're holding ourselves accountable to the learning goals. So are we actively listening? Are we present? So try your best to do that tonight with us. We are going to be sharing a lot of ourselves and what we're thinking in the chat. So make sure that you're putting in the chat when you have an idea or you're responding to something that we're talking about. You're welcome to just put that through. Bill will be able to facilitate that for us. And then always, I love taking notes, while I'm listening to something. So however you do it, paper, pencil, on your phone, it's always good to take a few notes so you remember what we discussed tonight. So our guiding texts that we're going to be using, on the left, you'll see Foundations for Teaching English Language Learners by Wayne Wright. You may have already used this text in your studies, or if you teach pre-service teachers, this is like one of, I think, the most comprehensive guides to working with English learners. So, for me, I've used this when teaching future teachers, school counselors, school psychologists, how to approach teaching and really truly how to understand students from different linguistic and cultural backgrounds. So this is a great text to use, and we'll be using it tonight in the presentation. And then on the right, you see the text Creating a Sense of Belonging for Immigrant and Refugee Students. And I used this book with my ESL teachers this year. So everyone got a copy of it and we did a book study. So we focused on a chapter each time we met and really talked through how we can build welcoming schools. So a lot of people think, oh, that's fluff. Of course we're kind and welcoming, but we know that it is purposeful planning, building capacity in our schools with our staff members, with our principals, making sure that all of the supports are in place for our students from day one. It's a lot of intentionality. So I think this is a great book to share with you all if you haven't read it yet, for how to really build a sense of belongingness in our schools. So our stories matter, and so much of what we do as teachers and who we are plays out in how we're presenting material, how we're expecting students to learn and socialize. So I think it's important that we start with ourselves. So I want to start with number one, where. So in the chat, please share the setting in which you teach. So you might be in a K-12 school or multiple schools if you're an itinerant. You might be at a university. You might be in an adult education center. And for our students that are here tonight that are pre-service, thinking about where you want to go. So this could be a utopia scenario. Like, I want to go to this school. This is where my sights are set. So share with us, where are you working with English learners? Okay, so I'm seeing, welcome. I'm seeing a K-5 school, an intensive program, and now this person is working on assessment. Very important. K-6 school in 4th, 5th, and 6th ESL class. That's awesome. We have someone teaching in a range of grades from 7 to 12. That's great. We have another teacher who is ESL K-2. Another teacher K-8 in Philadelphia. That's amazing. Lynn, hi Lynn, taught at a university for a long time, including a grad course at Duquesne, and is now working in ed tech development. And still, I know you're still working with international students from all over. Okay, and I'm hearing that we have a teacher that would love to teach at Bolskin Elementary and kindergarten, and other teachers are hoping to teach elementary K-4. That's awesome. So you're going to be there to build the foundation of our learners, which we need a strong foundation. That's awesome. Okay. And then we have one more person that's teaching an adult ESL, which is great. We never, ever want to forget about you because what you do is so important. Okay. So now I want you to think about who you've taught. So if you've been in the field for 30, 40 years, you've probably taught students who are at the beginning level all the way through advanced level of proficiency. Think about if you are a pre-service teacher and you're just getting into the field of ESL, do you want to work with students who are considered newcomers, new to the country, just learning the foundation of the English language? Or are you more interested in working with students in academic language who would be higher, more advanced level? So go ahead and share the who in the chat. That way we know who you're serving or who you've served in your career. I love it. So I'm seeing that we've had an instructor teach intensive academic English to pre-undergraduate students. We have teachers who have taught almost the whole range of WIDA proficiency levels, entering to expanding. We have a teacher right now teaching newcomers all the way up to expanding. That's wonderful. So go ahead and keep sharing. And I'm going to say, let's also, whenever you're ready, go ahead and put into the chat how you're teaching the students. So what instructional method are you using, and or what curriculum do you use to guide instruction? So think about, are you in an in-person class? Are you online? Are you remote? In my context, we use National Geographic products, so we use Lift and Reach Higher. Whenever I get together with teachers, you know, in a TESOL setting, that's always the biggest question is, what are you using to teach? Because everyone's looking for, you know, what program can I use that really, really helps the students to grow? And so I feel like it's a valuable question to share out how you are meeting the needs of the students. Nice. So I'm seeing a lot of National Geographic users. That's great. And people, yes, developing their own teacher-based curriculum, very much. That's something that I think in our field we do a lot of. So that's wonderful. Okay. And just for the sake of time, I'm going to keep moving, but feel free at any time to type more into the chat. I know that people are going to take a lot away from hearing about what you think and what you do. So when we know our students' stories, we value who they are. We value their linguistic backgrounds. I try to learn as much about that country as I can. I try to understand the setting from which my students came from, what their past schooling looked like, what their parents feel comfortable with, as far as expectations for helping with homework. All of those experiences help our English learners to feel that they're part of our school community. So I, as the teacher, try to build that bridge to understand the students' stories. At our schools, we really focus on celebrating our students' cultural backgrounds. And I know that this is something that we often do in schools where we, you know, have culture nights and we eat the food and we do the dances and we're celebrating. And I know that when we look at that in a textbook, that can be considered, you know, one of the kind of like base levels of understanding culture. I do see value though in this for our students because they're showcased and they're going to share with this whole student population about what country they're coming from, about their language, about some important parts of what they are bringing to school. So I've seen such success come from these nights where students are just so proud to share. And so I just want to encourage teachers to, you know, plan these kind of nights and work together with your community organizations to bring in, you know, support that mirrors what your students' backgrounds are. So let's talk about who English learners are in Pittsburgh. So our L population makes up about 10% of our overall student population. So that's about on the norm across the board in the United States, that our L population is about 10% of the overall student population. So always we were in Pittsburgh, that number was like 7%, 8%. And we, last school year got to be 10% of the overall student population. Our largest languages are Spanish, Arabic, Swahili, Pashto and Dari, and Uzbek. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our different instructional models and how we have our schools set up. So we have ELD regional centers where there's a larger population of English language learners. And then we also support the students in neighborhood schools with our itinerant ELD teachers. So I'll explain that a little bit more later. We identify our students through WIDA screening to determine their English language proficiency level, which is 1 through 6. And we'll talk about those levels later as well. But just so you know, 1.0 is newcomer level. The student has very little to no English. We say that proficiency is at 5.0. So if a student is screened and they get a 4.9 on the WIDA screener, they're entered into ESL services. But if they get a 5, they are not entered into ESL services. And we use WIDA Access as our annual assessment in Pennsylvania to document students' growth over time, so year over year. And that measures speaking, listening, reading, and writing. So we'll talk about that too. So in our school year right now, 25-26, we have almost 2,000 English learners. We serve 46 different schools in our district, and we have a total of 59 different languages spoken in our schools. So here's a map showing all of our linguistic diversity, at least our larger numbers of linguistic diversity. So as you can see, Spanish speakers make up the largest population in Pittsburgh Public Schools. And then Swahili speakers are next, Arabic speakers. We have a large group of Afghani students that speak either Pashto or Dari. We have a large number of Uzbek speakers, Russian speakers, Nepali speakers, Portuguese speakers. So as you know, through being in this field, an English learner is someone who is working on attaining proficiency in English as a new language. And oftentimes teachers are trying to, give me the 5 best tips you can give me for teaching English learners. Just tell me what to do. And it's always such a difficult answer because our students are so diverse. So English learners have a wide variety of different backgrounds, different ethnicities, home language, race, socioeconomic status, level of schooling. And then you also have to consider the parents' formal schooling, their proficiency in English and literacy in their home language. So there's so many factors that play into second language acquisition. And I just always want to remind people that, yes, I would love to give you a quick answer, but it's not always going to be a quick answer. So thinking about language as both receptive and productive. So when we think about receiving language, we're either listening to language or we're reading. When we're producing, we're speaking and we're writing. So as you can imagine, you've all been in schools, as a student, you've been in schools as a teacher. We're always, as teachers, asking students to receive language. Listen, 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 read, read, read. And, we always have to think about how are we increasing the productive language? How are we asking students to increase their student talk? How are we asking them to write? So it's important to remind people that, you know, what you've learned about second language acquisition or new language acquisition, that students always use what they know in their home language, and they make meaning in their new language based on what they can already do in the home language. So we use WIDA ELD standards in Pennsylvania, and these are K-12 standards. They're used in the majority of the states, and they really focus on giving us a clear guideline for how to view English language proficiency. So the big ideas are that they focus on equity of opportunity and access, integration of content and language, collaboration amongst teachers, administrators, families, and also give us a functional approach to language development. So we use these standards to have a conceptual framework of how to look at language and content and have some measurable expectations for how the students are going to grow over time. So I wanted to look at proficiency level descriptors just to give you a sense of what they look like. So I know Bill will be sharing out the WIDA can-do descriptors for 9-12, and I just focused on grades 9 through 12 as an example. So I hope that it works well. But this is an example of sentence use when you're looking at the interpretive communication mode. So listening, reading, and viewing. So at the end of level 1, which is the beginning stages of acquiring the new language, we want students to understand how meanings are extended or enhanced through multiple related simple sentences. So for example, all people have needs and wants. This is called demand. So we're seeing students start the year at maybe they just have a few words in English, and the amount that the student grows over time is getting to using simple sentences. When I go in and I work with teachers to help them understand working with English learners, of course, they want their students to go from a few words in English to boom, using end of level 5, using a wide variety of sentence types to show various increasingly complex relationships. So it's my job as an instructional specialist to explain the student's going to get to about, you know, half of a level of growth, or at best one level of growth during the course of the school year. So setting expectations to be reasonable will be, you know, helpful for them and what they're expecting the student to do and how they're assessing the student as well. So here's an example of expressive communication. So speaking, writing, and representing. Again, using sentences, the students are expected to extend or enhance meaning through simple sentences with emerging use of clauses. So for example, Bolivia is in South America. It is home to ... So Bill will be sharing the can-do descriptors with you, and they are given by grade band. So you would have them for kindergarten, grades 1-2, grades 3-5, grades 6-8, and then grades 9-12. So they're broken down by proficiency level. So you can see level 1 entering all the way to level 6 reaching. And then they're also broken down by the language domains: reading, writing, speaking, listening, oral language. And I always use these with teachers to, again, help them understand kind of some language uses and behaviors that they can expect from the students. And a big question is always, how am I going to grade this student? They're not on level with my current students. I point them back to the can-do descriptors. what can they do? How can they process a recount in your class? Can they match key content related terms and ideas to images? Where are they in this rubric? So again, talking to them about, okay, we want to see about half of a level or a level of growth this school year. And this is a realistic expectation for how much the students can grow. All right. Bill, anything in the chat that we should be looking at? And I'm sorry if I'm missing things with my
Yes,
presentation up.
I just raised my hand to draw attention to two things
Oh,
in the chat.
good.
Yes, I did
Okay,
put the
good.
Penbu descriptors in, so people can download those. And Michelle asks, have you ever used the can do in some fashion with families?
Mm, that's a really great question. So I have shown, like, whenever a parent has come in for a meeting and with an interpreter there, I've explained, here is your child's WIDA score from this past year, and then shown the kind of the proficiency level descriptors for that level and said, we're expecting them to learn this much over the course of the year. So looking ahead, these are some things that we can expect your child to do in English over the next year. So I have experienced parents being a little bit overwhelmed by that information because it can be a lot. So I think just treading lightly and sharing a few things, like we're going from word level to sentence level. I think for me, at least, how I feel is that we give so many details and so many acronyms and difficult terms. And I think because we're so specialized, the most, I think, beneficial thing we can do for families is help them to understand that the growth is going to be, gradual over time, and talking about, okay, in about 1 to 2 years, we're going to be really good with communication. And then we're going to be working really hard, in that 5 to 8 years time on academic language. And that trajectory of time, they're going to see their child grow a lot. So, realistic expectations. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Sure. So, I just wanted to draw out a few different groups of students that we've received in Pittsburgh, and I'm sure you've received a lot of the same students. You may have received other populations of students. So just to share a little bit, we went from having no students from Afghanistan, no Dari or Pashto speakers, to I think it was maybe the 21-2022 school year, we received 100 students from Afghanistan within 2 months. So we had to quickly, train the schools on the background of our students, where they're coming from. Many of the students were quickly taken out of Afghanistan at the fall of Kabul and moved to refugee camps in other countries and then brought to the United States. So the students had been moving around quite a bit, and just helping our teachers and our principals who had never worked with a student from Afghanistan before, how to approach language learning, how to use some familiar phrases in Dari and Pashto. Of course, we had no educational assistants who spoke those languages, so getting all of our support on board and aligned was a lot of fun. So we have been receiving students from Syria over time. Again, one of the largest refugee crises in the world, in working with families to get connected once they're in Pittsburgh to each other too is always part of, helping families to navigate those connections. We've received students from Ukraine who were either resettled through working with family members that were already in Pittsburgh or with churches who were receiving families, and helping those students to navigate, war going on in their country and looking back to home, maybe dad or an older brother or uncle were still there. And, a lot of course, concern for their safety and what's going on. And of course, we have, a huge population of families from Latin America. I have two ladies in my office alone from Venezuela that work with our families as our family liaisons, and just, helping families to navigate systems that they haven't encountered in their home country. And, formal schooling may look different. So how can we work with families to help them be able to access all of the online systems and all of the expectations that we have as families, is part of what we need to do as an ESL office. So I saw this stress bucket, and I saw this at a conference and thought, wow, this is exactly what our students experience. So if you look at the bucket, you think about everything that has gone on in the life of that student before migrating to the United States. So the pre-migration adversity is in the bucket. Maybe they are coming from a country that is currently at war. Maybe they have experienced losing a family member because of conflict. Maybe they have had to relocate, multiple times before being resettled in the United States. So thinking about what's coming with the student in that bucket. And then if you look up above at the cloud, that is our post-migration adversity. So once the students are in Pittsburgh in the United States, they're experiencing the language barrier. They're experiencing discrimination. They're experiencing family stress of, how are my parents going to find a job that will pay our bills? They're experiencing adjustment stress. At this point, they're experiencing fear of safety and making sure that when they come home from school that mom and dad will be there. So a lot of adversity is coming into that bucket. And then you see the hose, negative coping skills, and possibly a limited support system. So you're just feeding more and more and more water into the bucket. So, of course, I want to be hopeful and think about the protective factors of how are we letting out some of that water from the bucket at school? How are we protecting our students? How are we giving them the supports that they need? How are we helping them to make friends and make connections to become part of their community? So I wanted you to think about, what do you perceive are some of the greatest challenges for people that have been displaced? Or what are some of the biggest moments of adversity that you experienced if you have migrated or immigrated to a new location? Because, I know some have experienced that themselves. So tell us, when you look at the stress bucket, what are some of those huge challenges? And feel free to go ahead and type them into the chat. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Always being the other, even if it's not overt, it's still, you feel those feelings of discrimination. Absolutely. Struggling to navigate competing identities. So that pull for, I'm still part of where I'm from. I'm still Venezuelan, but now I've lived in the United States for 20 years. I'm not completely this, I'm not completely that. So very little support after the first few weeks. Yep. So a lot of our resettlement agencies, and hopefully they can get back to it, they really have to focus on the first 90 days that a family is in the United States to get everything going, and then they don't have as much support from the agency. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Not being understood by your teacher, by your friends. Yes. Very much not knowing what's going on. And I agree with you, lonely, missing friends, and your support system. So feel free to keep sharing. I am looking at our time and realizing, woof, I'm talking a lot and we're almost nearing our end of our time together. So I'm going to just go ahead and move forward, and just talk about how English learners are supported in Pittsburgh. So, in Pittsburgh Public Schools, we have both interpretation and translation services. So, any teacher in our school system can put in a request to either have a phone interpreter present at a meeting or to translate a document. And as you can imagine, for students who are requiring special education services, thinking even about going through the process, how much translation of documents needs to happen, how many meetings need to happen. So it's a huge undertaking, but we have a translation manager who is phenomenal and somehow is still getting through every day. I don't know how she does it. I mentioned our two family liaisons that work closely with the family, so they're on call for basically whatever educational question the family may have, their school placement, enrollment, even down to my child, had this misunderstanding with another student and I don't know what happened. Can you contact the school to help me? So we have amazing agencies in Pittsburgh that support our families. Two agencies that work with our Latino population, Casa San Jose and Latino Community Center. We have a referral system called ISAC, Immigrant Services and Connections. So if you have a question for a family, such as this family is food insecure, what resources do they have in the north side of Pittsburgh for a food bank? You can put a question like that through. You would get a response from a same language interpreter giving the family the answer. We have different refugee resettlement agencies in Pittsburgh: Jewish Family and Community Services, Hello Neighbor, and Ajapo. They all work with families being resettled, but right now, refugee resettlement is very limited. Literacy Pittsburgh does ESL classes for adult learners. And then Arise is an awesome organization who works with our immigrant youth populations. They provide after school support, they do summer camps, they do student groups to build community. So they are absolutely amazing. I'd recommend, reaching out to these places to learn more about what they do. So, how do we ensure that students are successful in school? Of course, our main goal is to really build language and literacy. So, we have to look at, based on the family's need or desire, would the family like them to attend an ESL regional center or an ELD regional center? or would they like their student to stay in their home school? So we have, in Pittsburgh Public Schools, we have quite a few regional centers at K-5, 6, 8, and 9, 12, where there are larger groups of English learners. So there would be classes for different proficiency levels and about 15 students in those classes receiving ESL versus an itinerant support model where there's a teacher assigned to a building and is maybe there for an entire day serving students, or maybe there for a half day and then goes to the second building. So that teacher might have about 10 students in the building to service. And so a lot of the instruction for that student is, with their mainstream teacher in ELA. So in PPS, we pull the students out to work with them if their WIDA level is a 1 to a 2.9. If they are a 3.0 or above, they're typically in a co-teach model where the ESL teacher and the ELA teacher work together to deliver the instruction. So I do a lot of work as an ELD instructional specialist, and I'm just one of two for our entire district. So it's, there's not a lot of me to go around, but I try to work with teachers in content areas, adapt instruction for English learners. So taking their content and thinking about linguistic scaffolds that they can use, visual scaffolds, and helping teachers to really understand that all classrooms are language learning environments, not just, ESL or world language classrooms, and that language is at the heart of teaching and learning. So thinking about modeling, I ask teachers to think about using that gradual release of responsibility. So English learners need to see the teacher do it. They need to see us doing it together, so the teacher and the students. And I always say, I do, but then we do it together many, many, many times before asking the students to do it in a small group and then doing it alone. So traditionally, school is I do, right? The teacher does, and then the student does independently. But when thinking about English learners, they need a lot of modeling to support what they're going to do eventually in an independent setting. I ask teachers to think about how they can simplify language in a way that's scaffolded appropriately. So we want to make sure that they're receiving comprehensible input. Thinking about what's the student's current level of English, what is that beautiful bubble of I+1 comprehensible input versus that, oh my gosh, this is so overwhelming, this English is too difficult, and now I'm shutting down and I'm not going to even try or participate. I always want teachers to think about the visuals that they can add to what they're doing. So, in the past, I would have a whiteboard and I would be drawing, or with the phone, later in my career, I would be pulling up pictures to show students. Whatever visual support is available, that creates comprehensible input. So now that we have all of these resources online to be adding, videos that support what we're doing, any pictures, it's just amazing what is out there now. And then thinking about building background. So I always want teachers to consider, is there a resource that the students can view in advance that gives them some background information before receiving the lesson, giving full context, really understand what they're going to be learning about, giving students opportunity to have something pre-taught to them. I love being able to pre-teach vocabulary and have that be my lesson before students read a story, because then they have that additional exposure. They're not going to master that vocabulary in my pre-teach, but then when they read it, they have some more understanding of what that means. And always thinking about connection to lived experience. So what do you know about their story that is, able for them to relate to what we're learning about in the classroom? And always when I'm working with teachers, I'm like, is there extra time? So if they're doing some classwork, are they able to extend that to taking it home and working through it? Because as you know, if you speak more than one language, that, cognitive time that's needed to really think through how to translate, you're thinking in one language and going to your home language and going back. That's a lot. And our students need that time to be able to complete what they're doing. So I'm going to kind of skip over this, but please feel free to share how you are adapting your instruction in the chat as I keep talking. And I hope it's not too distracting, but I think it's always helpful to learn from you how you're adapting instruction for your English learners. So another big piece of what I do in my role is advocating for students. So this is a picture at one of my schools. I spoke to a community about who our English learners are and what supports we need to provide for their families at this current time. And so people held up shields of, how they're supporting families, immigrant and refugee families at this time
Megan,
to show their support. Yes.
we're not seeing your screen if you meant to be sharing.
Oh boy. Uh-oh. I'm sorry about that. Thank you for telling me.
But we can use our imagination and see this picture in our.
Oh, that's okay. All right. Can you see this?
It's coming up.
Okay.
The picture in
I'm
my mind was
sorry.
pretty close.
I'm sorry that I lost you there. Okay. So, and I should also say that Bill is going to share slides with you as well. So if I was just talking, and you missed out on visuals, I apologize. And those will be available to you too. So just thinking about how our students and families need that strong advocate in our schools to promote understanding about what their needs are, who our students are, and how we're going to create a sense of belonging in our buildings. And I know that our teachers are so dedicated, especially our ESL team, to this work. And, kind of finding friends of ESL, like finding friends of our English learners amongst staff is always something that I think about. Like, who are the people who really believe in supporting our immigrant and refugee students and building them up? Because we need those friends. And it's not always going to be the ESL teacher who can be available to call the family, or can't always be available to, go out at dismissal and talk to mom. We need those advocates, in different places to be able to work with the students and also work with the families. So we have to think about how our strength lies in unity and in collaboration. So we have to think about how we can develop our colleagues' knowledge of what our English learners are facing. And this is all coming from our text at the top, sense of belonging for immigrant and refugee students. We have to think about providing colleagues with strategies and best practices in serving English learners. And we have to establish a culture of collaboration between the ESL teacher, our department, and the other teachers that are working with the students to really foster that shared responsibility. So I know as an ESL teacher, you've probably experienced that idea of, oh, well, that's your student, and I need you to do this because that's your student. And I'd say that's one of the biggest challenges in K-12 is helping teachers to really understand, yes, the student is learning English, but the student is also a mathematician and a scientist, and they're also learning in your classroom alongside their peers. So we need to share responsibility for the growth of this student. Okay. So my last thing, and I'm really close to 7 o'clock, and I know it's a beautiful day, so I don't want to keep anyone too long. But in the chat, I would just like you to share one way that you'll use today's information when you're working with English learners in the future. So I'll give you a minute to think about what you've learned today and go ahead and share that in the chat. I love it. So Sandy is sharing that she has used AI, specifically Magic School, to relevel some of her reading passages and stories. Shout out to Magic School AI. I just wanted to say that that is an awesome resource. So if anyone, hasn't used it yet, definitely go on there. That is a great way to adapt content. Yes, so definitely feel free to share anything such as the stress bucket with staff, with your colleagues. That's a good way to kind of talk through some challenges that your students have faced and have a connection to, how can we be a protective factor in the school and how can we help alleviate some of these stressors. Good. So thinking about how to use can-do descriptors with adults in their language learning process. The importance of learning background and culture helps to understand and recognize how to approach the beginning of having an English learner. Thinking about being the bridge, yes, and helping our colleagues, our other teachers to really understand the students and their families. Yes, suggestions for homeroom teachers, adding visuals, building background knowledge. It's always good. I know that people hear it in the beginning of the year and are reminded, and then come February, some of those things are just out the window. So another reminder is always so helpful. So I just want to thank everyone for coming tonight. I would always love to connect with people and, answer questions. If you're in the field and you're trying to work through a situation, reach out to me. If you're looking just to get into the field and looking for possibilities, reach out to me. I'm always happy to help. So I'll make sure that I leave my email up on the screen for a little bit. And then, Bill, is it okay if people ask questions if they have time? Or should we go
Sure.
ahead and close out?
I will close out and stop the recording, and then if anyone wants to stay on to ask some questions, we can do that. So thank you again, everyone, for coming. We appreciate your time on this Wednesday night. I hope that this was some good professional development for you. Megan, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. This was an outstanding presentation. I'm sorry I didn't tell you that we couldn't see your screen sooner. I thought you were just talking to us. But we do have the slides in the chat, and you can
It's
just
all
hover
good.
over that link and it's downloadable. So thank you again. And as a reminder, again, May 11th is going to be our Ask Me Anything with attorney Rachel Rudder. to talk about immigration and how it's affecting our students. And May 30th will be our spring symposium, which is free for Penn Solis members right here at the Welcoming Center for New Pennsylvanians in Philadelphia. So thank you again, Megan, and thank you everyone for coming. And if anyone wants to stay and chat with Megan, you are welcome to do so.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.